Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for the second episode of the SLR Magic Anamorphic series. I'm Chito Ferradans, and in this episode I'm gonna ramble about the Anamorphot 2.0. If you haven't yet, I strongly advise you to watch last week's video because there are some key aspects shared by both lenses, plus SLR Magic's guidelines that I won't repeat because these videos are already too long. The Anamorphot 2.0 has a more anamorphic-y feel with 2x stretch, making oval bokeh much more noticeable. It's also much heavier and larger than the 1.33, weighing around 500 grams, with still 62mm rear threads and 77mm front threads. Alignment is identical to the 1.33 with the reverse lock ring, which is pretty awesome, but getting it aligned properly is trickier. Because you can't just trust the white line, you should check with flares every time. It features the near normal dial, but Andrew Chan from SLR Magic has told me they will be mostly sold with the rangefinder since double focus wasn't such a hit. Because of that, most of these tests will be conducted with the rangefinder attached. If it's not on, the settings will indicate that. The lens was released very recently, so there's still little information going around about it. A little more expensive than the 1.33 version, the 2.0 retails for $1,200 or $1,600 if you include the rangefinder in the package. You can get it straight from SLR Magic's website or Adorama. This one isn't supposed to perform good at apertures faster than f4, and that shows pretty easily. I still find resolution a bit too compromised even at slower apertures on the 135mm, so I guess it didn't like the Tire 11A very much. Poor edge quality is also quite noticeable, disregarding the aperture. Also, if you go too extreme on the fast apertures, you'll get diamonds all around for bokeh, as you can see in this other video. The flares are as saturated as the 1.33 version. I'd definitely give these lenses a go if I wanted an extreme sci-fi look from the flares. Using a warm light source takes a little of the saturation off, but it's still very strong. A useful tip is that you might be able to fine-tune this strong blue with a hue adjustment in post, without affecting the rest of the shot, since it's so well defined. Just for the record, I also shot the flares without the rangefinder. The effect is the same, just a couple more added elements, also blue, and a little streaking up or down from the light source, which I thought looked pretty cool since it's not a very common artifact. For vignetting, I shot tests with and without the rangefinder. Without the rangefinder, you're able to get an almost vignette-free image at 58mm with a Helios 44, which is kind of amazing. Not even the Koa does that good on a 16:9 frame. Switching to the L Nikkor clears the image completely, and the Jupiter 9 is just for comparison, since most 2x anamorphics are only vignette-free at 85mm. Yeah, distortion is pretty extreme, but if you're planning on using a 4:3 crop, you're all good. When the rangefinder comes into play, the 2.4:1 aspect ratio becomes mandatory for both the Helios and the L Nikkor, with massive black edges. In some ways, the Anamorphot 2.0 was very similar to the 1.33, since both lenses have a very similar design, but I struggled a lot more with focus this time, even at slower apertures, having to close it down to f8 or f11 at some points, when most lenses are fine at f5.6. You can also check this test with a 3.56:1 aspect ratio on this other link, but for here I'll stick with 2.4:1, which clears the frame from most of the distortion on the sides. Side note, distortion isn't always a bad thing since anamorphics are the only way to achieve such artifact. Having the rangefinder on simplified things a lot, saving me from a truly double focus system, but still wasn't enough most of the times to be absolutely positive if something was in focus or not. The low light part was hard. I tried to hang on to f4 for best results and to avoid the diamond-shaped bokeh, but that caused an increase in ISO values, plus I had to go for better lit environments, which aren't always available for the Gorilla shooter. There are a few f2.8 shots in there, and it's quite easy to spot them. I feel this Anamorphot wasn't expected to be used on full-frame sensors, and it should perform much better on Micro Four Thirds or even APS-C. This series has only been made possible thanks to SLR Magic, so thank you guys for this opportunity. I hope you found some useful information in this episode, and subscribe now for next week's video, then head on to the blog for links and stuff. See you next Sunday discussing the rangefinder, which was already used in this video, but we'll have a proper review by then. Also, any and all help spreading these videos is more than welcome, along with feedback. So if you have any questions or if there's anything you'd like to see, shoot a comment below or send me a message and I'll get back to you. See you next week. Chito Ferradans out.